Hello, we are the Ministry of Your Truth, and we've been listening to this audio book of the Quran, a new translation by N.J. Darwood, for roughly a week now. And it interests us because of the many different claims, both from the religion of Islam and people in the West. This new translation is by N.J. Darwood, so we have no clue who that guy was. We did ask a question in the comments. So, is this the most accurate translation into English available on YouTube, with no twisting it to hide certain things, etc., which may upset unbelievers or infidels, as Islam calls them, or people in the West, non-believers, etc., in their different statements? And so, if Injil is declaring Jesus Christ, or means Jesus Christ, or points to Jesus Christ, it won't be twisted to hide that fact, because we did come across another video quite a while back where an ex-Muslim scholar who had converted to Christianity told Christian Life Ministries on the street, maybe in America somewhere, Canada, that Injil was actually talking about Jesus the Christ. Okay, so we're having a look at this guy N.J. Darwood to clarify who he was exactly. Born Nassim Joseph Darwood, 27th August 1927 to 20 November 2014. He was an Iraqi translator who is best known for his translation of the Quran. Nassim Joseph Darwood was born in Baghdad to a Jewish family. His family name was Yehuda. Okay, that's Judea, isn't it? Or the Jews took their name from these first three letters, right? And they were called Jews in the Middle Ages. So I guess they ran with that, perhaps. But in the Iraqi tradition, his legal name consisted of his own given name, plus those of his father and paternal grandfather, Nassim Yosef, or Joseph David. He changed David to Darwood when he was granted British nationality in the 1940s. His non-diplome, or his AKA name, was N.J. Darwood. Bilingual in Arabic and English, he started tutoring schoolmates in English. He came to England as an Iraq state scholar in 1945 and studied English literature and classical Arabic at the University of London, and the first cohort of students to resume normal university studies after the Second World War, and so forth. And he was associated with the founder of the Penguin Classics, Dr. E.V. Rue, CBE, and a person called Lane, Sir Alan Lane. He was actually the founder of Penguin Books. His translation of the Quran is still thought to be the best-selling English language version. It has been reprinted at least 70 times, appearing in several revised editions and formats. For N.J. Darwood, the Quran was a lifetime, quote, work in progress, unquote, constantly revised and refined in the course of an entire career. Language and use of English change constantly over time. For example, terms such as men and mankind did not have the same gender-specific connotations for the reader of the 1950s that might apply today. Darwood's translation has never been out of print. A newly revised edition was published in May 2014. N.J. Darwood's approach to the Quran is that of a scholar approaching the greatest work of classical Arabic literature, free from any religious bias. He greatly admires the Quran's eloquence and powerful rhetoric, describing it in his introduction as not only one of the most influential books of prophetic literature, but also a literary masterpiece in its own right. In his translation, endeavours to do justice to both. The translation includes explanatory footnotes. Darwood has also edited and abridged the Muqaddimah of the great philosopher historian Ibn Khaldun, published by Princeton University Press and described by Mark Zuckerberg as, quote, one of the 23 books everyone should read, unquote. He has retold some of the best known stories of the Arabian Nights in 3 children's books in the Puffin book series. So that's basically it for NJ Darwood. Okay, we're going to look at Muhammad, because there's a lot of controversy in regards to Muhammad and the Quran. Okay, born Muhammad ibn Abdullah, around about 570 and died 8 June 632 CE. Was an Arab religious, social and political leader and the founder of the world religion of Islam. According to Islamic doctrine, he was a prophet divinely inspired to preach and confirm the monotheistic teachings of Adam, Abraham, Moses, Jesus and other prophets. Well, actually Jesus in a sense was polytheistic, because he spoke of his father God the Father, and himself being one, being part of the Godhead and being divine, even though he put his divinity aside when he was born. He was God incarnate in the flesh, and so forth. He is believed to be the final prophet of God in all the main branches of Islam, though some modern denominations diverge from this belief. Muhammad united Arabia into a single Muslim polity, which means it's an identifiable political entity, any group of people who have a collective identity, who are organised by some form of institutionalised social relations and have a capacity to mobilise resources. A polity can be any other group of people organised, and so forth. So Muhammad united Arabia, the Arabian Peninsula, a peninsula of Western Asia, etc., etc. But notice with this word here, it has on the end ia or ear, which is a end suffix, which means that, well, if you define it, it's a loan word, a Greek Latin loan word, which basically means that these people were the possessors of a region or a language, if it has the IC, Arabic. So in reality there was no Arabia, no Arabic, and no Garabia either. Okay? It's just a region that these people happen to possess or be occupying. Okay, so Muhammad united the Arabia into a single Muslim polity, with the Quran as well as its teachings and practices forming the basis of Islamic religious belief. Muhammad was born approximately 570 CE in Mecca, son of Abdullah and Amina. His father Abdullah was the son of Quraysh tribal leader Abd al-Muttalib bin Hashim, and he died a few months before Muhammad's birth. His mother Amina died when he was 6, leaving Muhammad an orphan. He was raised under the care of his grandfather Abd al-Muttalib and paternal uncle Abu Talib. In later years he would periodically seclude himself in a mountain cave named Hira for several nights of prayer. When he was 40, Muhammad reported being visited by Gabriel in the cave and receiving his first revelation from God. An event described in Islamic tradition as taking place in AD 1610, during which the Islamic Prophet Muhammad was visited by the angel Jibril, or Gabriel, known as Gabriel in English, who revealed to him the beginnings of what would later become the Islamic, or the Quran, and then the religion. Muhammad started preaching those revelations publicly, proclaiming that God is one, that complete submission, or Islam. That's what Islam means. An Abrahamic monotheistic religion teaching that Muhammad is the messenger of God is the world's second largest religion behind Christianity, with 1.9 billion followers, or 24.9% of the world's population known as Muslims. Muhammad started preaching these revelations publicly, proclaiming that God is one, that complete submission, or Islam, to God is the right way of life then, and that he was a prophet and messenger of God, similar to the other prophets in Islam. Muhammad's followers were initially few in number. He experienced hostility from Meccan polytheists. For 13 years they had many other gods. The new Muslims were often subjected to abuse and persecution. The persecution lasted for 12 years, beginning from the advent of Islam to Hijrah. Muhammad preached Islam secretly for 3 years, then he openly preached Islam. To escape ongoing persecution, he sent some of his followers to Abyssinia, the kingdom of Aksum, also known as the kingdom of Aksum, or the Aksumite Empire, was an ancient kingdom from the 2nd to the 10th century, with its capital at the city of Aksum, or Aksum. The kingdom was centered, I'm not really sure. Anyway, he sent some of his followers to Abyssinia in 615 before he and his followers migrated from Mecca to Medina, officially Al-Madina al-Munawwara, commonly simplified as Medina or Medina, is the second holiest city in Islam and the capital of the Medina province of Saudi Arabia, then known as Yathrib. Later in 622, this event, the Hijrah, which is a medieval Latin transliteration of the Arabic word meaning departure or migration, among other definitions. Alternative transliterations of the word include Hijrah or Hijrah. The word is commonly used to refer to the journey of the Islamic people, followers, right? And this marks the beginning of the Islamic calendar, which is a lunar calendar. The Islamic, Muslim or Arabic calendar. A lunar calendar consisting of 12 lunar months in a year of 354 or 355 days. It used to determine the proper days of Islamic holidays and rituals. So it wasn't a lunar solar, it was lunar. Yeah? Following the movements of the moon. Also known as the Hijrah calendar. In Medina, Muhammad united the tribes under the Constitution of Medina. We may have a look at that at a later date, in a later video. In December 629, the Constitution of Medina, also known as the Charter of Medina, was drawn up on behalf of the Islamic Prophet Muhammad shortly after his arrival at Medina in 622 CE, following the Hijrah from Mecca. Okay, so in December 629, after 8 years of intermittent fighting with Meccan tribes, Muhammad gathered an army of 10,000 Muslims converts and marched on the city of Mecca. The conquest went largely uncontested, and Muhammad seized the city with little bloodshed. In 632, a few months after returning from the farewell pilgrimage, he fell ill and died. By the time of his death, most of the Arabian Peninsula had converted to Islam. The revelations, each known as Ayah, the true sign of God, which is a verse in the Quran, one of the statements of varying length that make up the chapters, surah, of the Quran, and are marked by a number in the Quranic context. The word means evidence, sign or miracle, and in Arabic, I guess, literally sign of God, that Muhammad reported receiving until his death, form the verses of the Quran regarded by Muslims as a verbatim word of God, the official words of God, on which the religion is based. Beside the Quran, Muhammad's teachings and practices, Sunnah, found in Hadith and Sirah biography literature are also upheld and used as source of Islamic law. You'd have to look at the Sharia. Okay. A religious law forming part of the Islamic tradition. It is derived from the religious precepts of Islam and It is based on the sacred scriptures of Islam, particularly the Quran and Hadith. In Arabic, the term Sharia refers to God's immutable divine law. Okay. There's some more information there. The name Muhammad means praiseworthy and appears 4 times in the Quran. The Quran also addresses Muhammad in the second person by various appellations: Prophet, Messenger, Servant of God, Abd, Announcer, Bashir. So maybe that's where that House of Consciousness Imam Bashir, because they usually choose a name, right? Change their name, like there might be Red Pill, Blue Pill, Black Jesus, you know, they go under a different name, pseudo, right? So Imam Bashir means he's like a leader in the Islamic faith, and he's announcing something, right? Anyway, it talks about the Quran. The Quran is the central religious text of Islam. Muslims believe it represents the words of God revealed by the Archangel Gabriel to Muhammad. The Quran, however, provides minimal assistance for Muhammad's chronological biography. Most Quranic verses do not provide significant historical context. His early biographies, Hadith, pre-Islamic Arabia, his childhood and early life. And what we'd like to get at is there's many people out there in the West that really give Muslims a hard time about Muhammad. Okay. In his teens, Muhammad accompanied his uncle on Syrian trading journeys to gain experience in commercial trade. Islamic tradition states that when Muhammad was either 9 or 12 while accompanying the Meccan's caravan to Syria, he met a Christian monk or hermit named Bahira, who was an Arabian Nestorian or possibly Gnostic Nestorian monk. Okay, so that would be something to do with Nestorius, who had a debate with a Roman Catholic called Cyril over Nestorius's claim of the Christ being hypostasis, or both God or divine and man. So he was called a heretic, etc., etc. And later on, the original apostolic Church of the East, founded by Thomas, with the assistance of Addai, Thaddeus, Bartholomew and Peter, founded this church in the East. And these high priests of that church at some point said, well, we agree with what Nestorius stated, that Christ had 2 natures, 2 substances. He was both divine and human. So because of that, they said, well, you know, we don't hail him as the founder of our church, right? Because later on they were called Nestorians, erroneously called Nestorians, right? They said we acknowledge him because he's saying something that we believed thousands of years before. So they were, because of that, they were labelled by the Roman Catholic Church, etc., as heretics and persecuted, and they've been persecuted for 18 centuries, I might as well say 20 centuries now, because they were still being attacked by ISIS, kicked out of their homes, etc., because the Kurds, who claimed that they were the original inhabitants of Syria, etc., northern part of Syria, were pointing them out, you know, because they had a dislike of them. So that's how the Taliban or ISIS figured out where they were and kicked them out of their houses, etc., etc. So this particular church, having the original manuscripts given to them by Thomas, who when the Church of Jerusalem was destroyed, temple, etc. They fled across countries, went to China, India, probably went on to preach in Japan, etc. Before Thomas, etc. were martyred. So they gave them these, whatever they supposedly heard and saw and someone wrote down. Thomas or someone grabbed these manuscripts and took off across those lands, founded that church, and he gave it to the high priests, who then hid it from the Roman Catholics, knowing that they'd probably get hold of it, destroy it, and put those people to death. Right? And, they'd take those texts and you never see them. Right? They'd hide them in their vault, whatever, as they did. And also from Islam, they hid it from Islam. But Islam was just basically after the land. So Islam came in and says, right, you can live under peace, under Islamic rule, but you can't have any like idols, etc. right, in your churches. So they got rid of these idols, or these figures they venerated. Okay. Take note of that, they venerated them. And changed everything to icons. And so they lived in peace under that Islamic rule to a certain time when these nasty caliphates arose and they persecuted them. Then they were persecuted by Genghis Khan and the Mongols, Islam and others throughout the centuries, so they kept running. Until today, where there's a revived apostolic church who still follow those customs, traditions, etc. of the original apostolic church founded by Thomas, etc. So Bahira was an Arabian Nestorian. The Nestorian church erroneously being called that for centuries and centuries. They got used to it. So yeah, they say, well, yeah, you can call us Nestorian. One guy, one of these patriarchs, says, yeah, if you keep calling us Nestorian, we're going to have to go to war. But they've accepted it because that's a label, much like Christian, that's been put on them for centuries and centuries, so you just go with it. Okay, so Bahira was an Arabian Nestorian, or possibly Gnostic Nestorian monk, who, according to Islamic tradition, foretold to the adolescent Muhammad his future as a prophet. His name derives from the Syriac Bahira, meaning tested, etc. The History of Mohammad. Several years later, according to a narration collected by historian Ibn Ishaq, Muhammad was involved with a well-known story about setting the black stone in place in the wall of the Kaaba in 605. The black stone, a sacred object, was removed during renovations to the Kaaba. The Meccan leaders could not agree which clan should return the black stone to its place. They decided to ask the next man who come through the gate to make that decision. That man was a 35-year-old Muhammad. This event happened 5 years before the first revelation by Gabriel to him, the angel Gabriel. He asked for a cloth and laid the black stone in its centre. The clan leaders held the corners of the cloth and together carried the black stone to the right spot. Then Muhammad laid the stone, satisfying the honour of all. In the beginning of the Quran, which I've already covered. Sahih Bukhari narrates Muhammad describing his revelation as sometimes it is revealed like a ringing of a bell. Aisha, that was his youngest wife, reported, I saw the Prophet being inspired divinely on a very cold day and noticed the sweat dropping from his forehead as the inspiration was over. According to Welch, some guy called Welch, Alfred T. Welch, a professor of religious studies at Michigan State University. Welch got his PhD degree in Arabic and Islamic studies, blah blah blah, according to him. These descriptions may be considered genuine since they are unlikely to have been forged by later Muslims. Muhammad was confident that he could distinguish his own thoughts from these messages. According to the Quran, one of the main roles of Muhammad is to warn the unbelievers of their eschatological, a part of theology concerned with the final events of history. or the ultimate destiny of humanity. This concept is commonly referred to as the end of the world, or the apocalypse, or the end times. So, the end time punishment, they will be judged by God, etc., etc., for their disbelief. And that's in the Quran 38:70, Quran 6:19, and so forth. Opposition. According to Muslim tradition, Muhammad's wife Khadija was the first to believe he was a prophet. She was followed by Muhammad's 10-year-old cousin Ali ibn Abi Talib, close friend Abu Bakr, and adopted son Zayd. He began to preach around 1613 to the public, the Quran. Most Meccans ignored it and mocked him, though a few became his followers. There were three main groups of early converts to Islam: younger brothers and sons of great merchants, people who had fallen out of the first rank in their tribe or failed to attain it, and the weak, mostly unprotected foreigners, and so forth. According to Ibn Sa'ad, opposition in Mecca started when Muhammad delivered verses that condemned the idol worship and the polytheism practiced by the Meccan forefathers. However, the Quranic exegesis maintains that it began as Muhammad started public preaching. As his followers increased, Muhammad became a threat to the local tribes and rulers of the city, whose wealth rested upon the Kaaba, the focal point of Meccan religious life that Muhammad threatened to overthrow. Muhammad's denunciation of the Meccan traditional religion was especially offensive to his own tribe, the Quraysh, as they were the guardians of the Kaaba. Powerful merchants attempted to convince Muhammad to abandon his preaching. He was offered admission to the inner circle of merchants, as well as an advantageous marriage. He refused both of these offers. Tradition records at great length the persecution of and ill treatment towards Muhammad and his followers. Sumayya bint Kayat, slave of a prominent Meccan leader, Abu Jahl, is famous as the first martyr of Islam, killed with a spear by her master when she refused to give up her faith. Bilal, who was one of the most trusted and loyal Sahaba, companions of the Islamic Prophet Muhammad. He was born in Mecca and is considered to have been the first Mu'azzin in history, chosen by Muhammad, and so forth. And it's just something here about there's a completely different story on the reason why the Muslims returned from Ethiopia to Mecca. According to this account, initially mentioned by Al-Waqidi, then rehashed or rewritten by Ibn Sa'ad and Tabari, but not by Ibn Hisham and not by Ibn Ishaq. Muhammad, desperately hoping for an accommodation which this tribe, pronounced a verse acknowledging the existence of three Meccan goddesses considered to be the daughters of Allah. That would be Allat, A-L-L-A-T, who was supposed to be pregnant, and so forth. Don't know the rest of them, just remember that from reading Czech publications that one of them was called Allat, A-L-L-A-T. Supposedly, on House of Consciousness, polite debate on the street with Imam Bashir, he says this was originally Allah's name, Allat, because the H was interchangeable. But do your personal research on that. We're just going by what they said on that. Imam Bashir, I think, said it was rubbish, etc. Muhammad retracted his verses the next day at the behest or the request of Gabriel, claiming that the verses were whispered by the devil himself. Instead, a ridicule of these gods was offered. This episode, known as the story of the cranes, is also known as satanic verses. According to the story, this led to a general reconciliation between Muhammad and the Meccans. So this guy that came out with that satanic verses, I've forgotten his name, where singer Cat Stevens, aka Yusuf Islam, made threats against him, and there was a lot threats made against that guy's life. Is it Salman Rushdie? Yeah, he came up with that, revealing the satanic verses. Okay, and there's plenty more here. And his wife dies, and he has a second wife, and then I don't know what happened to her, and then he marries a third one, a younger one, which is the source of Western people, Christians, etc., or trolls or whatever, pointing the finger at Muhammad, saying, oh, he was this, he was that.